I'm Gwen Preston of Resource Maven, and we're here at my new conference, which is called Financing Opportunities, and I am joined by Jeff Wilson, who has a company that fits that bill nicely. Jeff is with Precipitate Gold, and Precipitate is currently in the midst of a financing to fund work on an exciting, still new, I'll say new project, although you've actually had it for a little while. So give us a little backstory on what the project is, and then we can dive into why you're ready to get working on it now.
Sure, absolutely. So we have, our primary asset is called the Pueblo Grande Project, which is in the Dominican Republic. This is a land package that we acquired late last year and secured the final details of earlier this year. It's strategic in the sense that it is in a very active mining camp within the Dominican Republic and essentially surrounds on three sides one of the largest gold mining operations in the world, and that's Barrick's Pueblo Viejo mine in the Dominican Republic. So this is an area where we feel as if permitting, community issues, these kinds of things are much more attainable for a company like ourselves, and also provides a great number of exploration targets that have never been tested before.
Okay, so let's dive into those targets. There's a whole bunch of things that you mentioned that we could talk about, but those targets, so you basically surround Pueblo Viejo, which, like you say, one of the biggest gold mines in the world, an absolutely massive operation, on three sides. Why is there a project right adjacent to this immense deposit that has unexplored targets on it?
Yeah, I'll try to make it brief. It's an interesting story. Essentially, this was a previous operation. Prior to Barrick, it was run by a Dominican nationalized operation, and unfortunately turned it into a bit of an environmental disaster. And so they were forced to shut down and put it out to tender to the private sector. And Barrick, at the time, was actually Placer before they merged, won the bid and acquired all of the core ground that was the existing Pueblo Viejo mine operation. What they were prevented from acquiring at that time in the bidding process was the surrounding ground. The Dominican government wanted to instill competition and have the second place or the third place bidders acquire some of the surrounding ground. So this ground was not available to Barrick at the initial onset,
right,
and has been held by someone else the entire time ever since, now held by Precipitate. But there is nothing, one of the things I do like to stipulate is there's nothing to prevent Barrick from acquiring or going after that surrounding ground now.
Right. So interesting backstory. And those who have looked at the ground, your ground, Pueblo Grande, in the time since, had a bit of a different approach to understanding, or had a different thought pattern about how the geology might work there, which, the way that I've looked at the maps with you, leaves a lot of targets really wide open for for a new model for what's going on that you guys have come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been fairly extensive prior work on a number of different zones within our really quite large land package. Some of those were programs that were targeting quite interesting geochem numbers at surface, so some interesting rock and soil samples, and delivered some fairly impressive drill intercepts, near surface mineralization, open pitable style mineralization. But previous operators were never really able to get these things to sort of hang together or to generate any real consistency with that. We were fortunate, or are fortunate, that we've got a fantastic board of directors, and one of our directors had spent about 10 years working in the Dominican Republic as an exploration geologist, and had coveted a portion of this ground that no one else had really explored with any sort of conviction. And so he had highly coveted this land package and this particular target, felt that it had been underappreciated and certainly underexplored. And that was sort of the catalyst for us to then make a move to try to acquire this ground, with that being sort of our primary target.
So now you've got the ground, you've got the concept, you've pulled together a whole bunch of data, added to it with sampling and geophysics and whatnot. Now you have a host of targets on this ground that you're pretty excited to get out there and test, hence now financing. So you have the targets going, but there was another catalyst that makes you now ready to get out there and drill, which is you got permits to be able to do that.
Correct. And I've long been a believer that when you go to the market for some sort of an equity financing or a capital raise, it should be with as clear a directive as possible. And so for us, over the course of the last several months, there have been some opportunities and a fairly consistent amount of interest to raise some money. But our view was that we felt as if there was work that we could do with the money that we had in the treasury that included geophysical work, geochemical work, mapping, honing in on how we wanted to tackle this relatively broad target and identify specific targets. And as you point out, one of the most critical components is to get ourselves fully permitted so that there was nothing to stop us from being able to deploy any capital that we raise in an equity financing directly into a drill program without unnecessary delays.
And when you announced the receipt of those permits, the market reacted more favorably, I think, than you or I expected. So I think that sort of speaks to people have a bit of hesitation about the Dominican Republic as a jurisdiction, but when they see it working, they like the opportunity there because the geology has things like Pueblo Viejo right there.
Correct. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, you know, much like exploration work, you know, I think the sort of the strategy for running a junior company is oftentimes a process of elimination and ticking of boxes. And so one of the boxes that I think the market was kind of ratcheted up a little bit and unsure of was the receipt of permits.
Yeah.
So when that happened, as you say, I think the response was better than I thought it was going to be. The share price responded very favorably. We've sort of settled in here now on what I think is a fairly true, fair value for the market cap and the share price. We can hopefully, you know, execute and close on this financing and then get to work and get the drills turning soon.
Well, good luck with all the paper chasing that is a financing. From what I understand, is you have a lot of interest in the raise, so it doesn't seem like it's going to be too much of a challenge. And I certainly look forward to following your progress as you get those drills turning on these targets.
Great. Thank you very much, Gwen.
Thanks.